graduate student and a student here, I'm really honored to come back and doing what I do now. It's in no shape, way, or form related to physics. But I think everything I learned during my physics training I use, and I think it's been instrumental in how I've been able to look at the world and fundamentally what I've been able to achieve. So when I was first asked to come and give this presentation, I didn't think it was going to be as much work as it actually was. Because I had to think about what to say, because it's not very often that you get a venture capitalist to come and speak in a physics department. And it's not because VCs don't have a lot to say. Some would argue that we like the sound of our own voices a lot, and we can talk ad nauseum about topics that we have no idea. But it was because I was trying to frame the discussion. I think when I decided to study physics, I never looked at studying physics as a way of getting a simple degree that allowed me to party all the time and be popular. It was certainly not the easiest choice. It was actually hard, and it was, as I was explaining to somebody, it was a lot of suffering in the process. And I think that part of that suffering is really important if it's successful. So, and I didn't want to come here and talk about the fact that, you know, the world is all about applied physics, because fundamentally I believe that those of us that studied physics, for me personally, it was about, I found it beautiful, I found it amazing that we could explain how nature worked using this framework of mathematics on one side and bring it together with science and do experiments in the lab that actually reflected what you measured. That was the reason I got into it to begin with. And then, so there was a choice of what do you do when you get into something. Do you continue to pursue the quest for knowledge and science and continue to figure out how the world works? Or do you do something different? And I think without the pursuit of knowledge purely for the sake of knowledge, innovation as we know it will not have a future. So it's very, very important for a lot of physicists to focus on physics alone. But there are some of us. There are those of you that may be in your undergraduate studies, or those of you that may be finishing your graduate studies, are kind of asking the question, okay, what do I do with my physics degree? Can I do stuff with my physics degree outside of physics? And this talk is about, the answer to that question is unequivocally yes. And this talk is about those things that from, in my experience, make physicists successful. And the reality is I could put all of those in one slide and I could talk to you for 1 minute and this presentation would be over. But what I want to do is define, first of all, through the lens that I looked at the problem. And the lens that I look at it is not the lens of working in large companies or large organizations. It's the lens of working with innovative young startups and in an entrepreneurial culture. That is where I have spent my professional career. That's what I do every day. So I want to mention that I'm talking to those of you who are looking to see what else is there to do outside of physics. If you want to do physics, I think that's wonderful. But some of you may not want to do physics for the sake of physics. And also tell you that the area that I see that has the greatest potential for physicists is really innovation and what's happening in the young, innovative companies. And I'm sure there's plenty of opportunities elsewhere, but that's the lens that I talk through. So to start off with, I told you what I do now, and I want to just talk about what that means. So what does it mean to be in the VC business? So first of all, you start with a meaningful pool of capital. In the case of the fund I'm a part of, I'm a managing partner of a fund called Van Edge Capital, and we have about $250 million of capital that we're managing. And this capital is raised from the number of individuals, but also a lot of pension funds or fund of funds that are looking for a different asset class other than putting their money into the stock market or gold or whatever to generate returns. And the way it works is you have that pool of money and the expectations are massive. The expectations are you're going to generate returns from this large pool of capital. And the way it works is you have an investment strategy. In other words, you're going to focus in specific areas, make bets on on great entrepreneurs, on innovators, on people who have ideas, who are creative. And in a lot of cases, you invest in hopes and dreams and aspirations. You do not invest in profits. You do not invest in some VCs do, but majority of ideas that come to me, or majority of the VCs, are purely about hopes and dreams and the promise of the future. So what I look at and what I invest in, first and foremost, are people and their ideas. So when I talk about the aspects of physics that makes that interesting, and I see physicists, when they come to me, I actually look at to see whether they have the attributes that I'm looking for. Because very few companies actually end up doing what they said they would. They end up here, and they end up doing something way different over here. And then when we invest in a business, that's when the real hard work begins. You just don't put your money in, step back, you put it in, and you try to help these companies create value and succeed, and ultimately exit, and then distribute the money back to the people that they gave it to you. So, and our business is a business of risk. There's a huge amount of risk. There's a huge amount of uncertainty involved. And probably the risks are not just about, does this technology work or not, or does this idea work or not, or is this the market opportunity for what we're trying to do. A lot of the times the risks are, can these people do what they're supposed to do? Can they actually accomplish the task that is before them? And probably if you do the statistical analysis of all the VC deals, you will find out that there are two important parameters that determine success above all else. The first one is actually the timing. Your timing has to be right, and the second one are the people. And the distributions are highly nonlinear. In other words, there's a lot of people who talk about the power law distribution in financial returns, and that's the probabilities are not normally distributed. You don't invest in 100 things, and on average you make 2 times your money, so it's all good. It's very, very nonlinear. Very, very few opportunities make the difference. You end up losing money on most things, and the very few pay for the rest. This is a very, very important concept, because I think it's also true in the way people are and how people interact with others, because I think you look at one's life, or potentially even in science. If you look at in science or in physics, the contribution made by very few is enormous. So this is kind of a non-linear kind of thing. And I think it's true in a lot of things in humanity, that's what they call power law distribution, or a highly non-linear distribution. So I'll give you a few examples of companies I invested in and how we found them and where they came from. So one of them is a company based in San Francisco, and this was started by a graduate student out of MIT. And this graduate student out of MIT wanted to analyze a large volume of data that were coming from Twitter for his master's thesis. And he tried to stuff all of this into a huge database and run an analysis on it. Well, when he stuffed the Twitter data into his database and tried to run an analysis on it, it took days. It could take years, potentially, if the data set was big enough. So he decided he was going to create a new database, and he was going to run it on parallel compute hardware known as graphic processing units that are in Xboxes, were actually originally created for the purpose of displaying graphics, highly parallelizable tasks. So we invested in him. There was another one, a company in Vancouver, and this was started by a PhD in mathematics out of New York, where he was actually a serial entrepreneur, and he had some ideas about that if you have time series data, that you have machines or you have devices that create some kind of a time series data that is a signal that varies with time, how do you detect the abnormal behavior from the normal behavior without knowing the underlying behavior of the system? That was called anomaly detection, and it's one of the applications of machine intelligence. We ended up investing in this company and selling it to Splunk, and he made actually a lot of money as a result of that. And the other one was another company that was started by another graduate student in the Department of Mathematics, and he had the idea that he wanted to use some of the math skills that he had learned to try to figure out how to detect security breaches that were occurring in industrial control systems that run dams and electric power plants and whatnot. How do you protect these things from from being attacked by hackers, which is a really, really big problem today. And we invested in him, and that company ended up being sold to General Electric, and that company is now General Electric is using this technology for the purpose. So a lot of these people that started these companies came from a discipline of science. They had ideas, but there was very little on the table when we backed them. And I think that innate sense of curiosity, that sense of creativity, that is so powerful and is everywhere in physics, because in physics, some of the theories, I mean, they're so abstract that you know, you figure that there's no other way anybody would have come up with them, that you have to have that innate sense of creativity. So I wanted to give you some sense of how I looked at this problem and how I looked at the traits that I'll explain come to later, which, like I said, can be summarized on one page. But before that, I think it's always instructive for some of the students that are sitting in the audience to not talk about concepts, but give examples of what happened. I mean, what was my personal experience of going from being a PhD student? I graduated in 1996 with my PhD in particle physics. I worked at TRAP, so that was a long time ago. Some of my professors are in the audience. And you guys all look about as young as you did back there, so there's no problem with that. But what happened was, I was doing my PhD. I finished my PhD in 1996. I was right in the middle of doing my grad work, and I was working at TRAP, and my plan was to become a physicist. I was going to do my postdoc. I actually had no idea at the time that there was anything else that I could do other than go and pursue physics and do physics. So when I was sitting at my computer writing software, which is what we did a lot of the time, and I got this email about this class that was being taught at UBC, and it was about concept of technology entrepreneurship, that there was an individual that was going to bring the two worlds together. And I was going to have an interview. So I put my name into the queue, and there was only 2 spots or whatever in the entire program. This class was filled with MBA students, and there were 2 or 3 non-MBA students here. And that is when I ran across this man. So if you see this man, be careful. So what happened was, this gentleman here is Hank Ferris, who's founded Ventures West, who's one of the original venture capital investors in the province. I actually think he's one of the fellows that started the BC tech industry. He's been associated with the D-Wave. He was one of the founders of D-Wave, angel investor in many startup companies, but also an inspiration to many actually physics students that have gone on to form companies. I don't want to say that my case is unique, because I think my case is actually repeated, and there's a pattern. Yeah.
Can you explain what an angel investor is?
Yeah, an angel investor is the person that invests in a person with an idea. They're an angel. They're like, you've got to be crazy to do that, because they really give you money. You go to them and you say, I want to do this, and they look at you and they say, you really want to do this, and you say yes, and then they'll check you out and see whether you're trustworthy, and then you'll say, well, I needed $300,000. And they say, okay, here's a check for $300,000. Literally, that's what happens. So what Hank did was, he was putting this class together, which was about, can I combine some scientists and put it together with some MBA students to see how the whole thing works. And in the process, he brought in, and I distinctly remember, a number of very successful entrepreneurs. And some of the people were like Ken Spencer, who was the founder of Creo, that I actually ended up becoming the chairman of the board for Bycast, and Dan Gelbart, who was another founder of Creo, or Norm Francis, who started Pivotal. All of these people came in. And all of these people came and talked about what they did, and how they started, and how they got to where they went. And it was a really, really important concept. For me, as a graduate student who had always looked at physics as an abstract topic, and it was really about, hey, there's another thing. And Haig has this thing, and he told me when we first met at Tramp, when we had coffee, and I remember the day distinctly, that he has this hypothesis that physicists actually make really good business people. So, and they make good entrepreneurs, and he still believes that to this day. And I kind of filed this in the back of my head at the time, and I said, well, I don't know anything about technology. Here's somebody who's been around the tech sector for a long time, who's invested in a bunch of deals. I'm going to take that and file it in the back of my head. I'm not going to take it as granted. I'm just going to see whether, over time, whether I'll subscribe to this hypothesis or not. And time went on, and I finished Kake's class, but through that experience, I decided that I was going to get out and try to work in private industry. But I had no idea, and my inclination was to be part of a startup. And I actually joined a startup that was created out of this department, and that was a startup that was created out of Lauren Whitehead's lab here, that spun out. A company called, at the time, was G&W Speaker Tape, and later became Sonogistics, where it was about a thin film technology that eventually, through various incarnations, made it into a flat panel speaker. And it was an interesting business. We built the world's best speaker systems. They sounded great. And we got all the awards, but we lost money on every one of them we sold. And we sold a lot of them. But that was a problem, because so we were a great bunch of people, and I was like the fourth person. And in that group, when I was there, all of the people there were from engineering physics or physics. Every single person in that company was from physics or eng physics. And from a technology perspective, we were able to do great things, but we didn't end up being successful, and the company didn't end up doing very well, and went under eventually. The shareholders lost all their money, including myself, and I didn't have very much, but I lost it anyway. So then it ended up being, as I was doing a bunch of other stuff, and again, I was in Gastown one day, and I was walking down across the street at Water Street in Gastown, and Haig was, like, literally, I'm not kidding, Haig was across the street on the other side. So he says, hey, how are you? What are you doing? And I go, well, I'm working at this job, or, the last one didn't work out, and it's just, I'm not having fun. He goes, well, I know these guys just down the street. There's this guy, David Slick. I met this guy, David Slick. And to give you some idea, David Slick was a guy from Squamish, where at the age of 16 he won the Intel prize for science. And he got accepted to MIT, but he decided he wasn't going to go because his father was ill. But he was a brilliant individual. David is today one of the key architects for a company called NetApp, and works on their next generation storage systems. So I met David, and the moment I met David, that was it. We didn't know what the hell we were going to do or how it was going to work out, but I knew that David was smart, and we were going to do something together. And initially, it seemed really, really easy, because this was now going back, this was in 2000, when the internet boom was at its height. So you could have an idea at that time that had anything to do with the internet, you could get a lot of money. And people were, there were public companies that had no profits, and I remember watching the news, and everybody was saying that profits is for suckers, all you need is eyeballs. And so David and I got together, and we had this crazy idea. David had this crazy idea initially that he was going to create this system for delivering internet radio and eventually video over broadband networks, like Netflix. He had this idea back in 1999 when having a T1 connection at that time was like amazing. If you had a T1 connection, you were a cat's meow. So what happened was we put the business plan together, we went on a roadshow. David had this big head of hair, he was really smart. We went down to Intel, we gave our pitch to Intel about how we wanted to deliver radio to all the homes and insert advertising in them, and the technology was really, really cool, and the Intel guys told us, wow, We're really impressed. We're building this global internet delivery network, and we want to put money. As a matter of fact, we want to put in like $10 million into your company. And we're like, gee, this is super easy. So then time goes on, so we're like, all right, we got this made, we've got $10 million, this is no problem. Who thought entrepreneurship was that difficult? So we come back to Vancouver, the Intel, and David lived in Squamish because he would not come to Vancouver because he thought the Vancouver weather was too polluted for him. So he would insist on being in Squamish at the time. So we flew, the Intel guys all came from Santa Clara, and they're like, we got to take you to Squamish. And they're like, where the hell is Squamish? And we kept saying, it's on the way to Whistler. And then they were okay. So we went to Squamish, we did the demo, and they're like, yeah, we're in. We're going to put in $10 million, and we're going to trial it in our network, and it's all good. And we were just set. So then came the 2000 collapse, and on February 14, 2001, I remember exactly the day because it was Valentine's Day, I got this call from the guy who told us he was going to give us the $10 million. And he goes, I got some bad news. And I'm going like, what happened? He goes, Intel's getting out of the streaming media business. And I'm like, how's that? He goes, yes, they just, I lost my job, and I asked them, I guess the $10 million's off the table, and indeed it was off the table. So the opportunity pretty much evaporated, and we were broke. At the time, my wife was still a graduate student. There was no money. I didn't know what I was going to do, actually. So my wife was TAing and earning the poor graduate student salary. She was actually a graduate student in physics. And we decided we were going to stitch things together and hang on and kind of, we didn't know what we were going to do, really. That was the thing. We weren't going to win. But all we had was the ability to convince people we were smart. It's true. We had the ability to convince people that we could comprehend really big, complex ideas and build cool stuff. And we had this demo of the radio with the internet ads in it that nobody cared about. And as a matter of fact, people were at the time saying that the internet radio thing was off. So we went around and actually met a few people, including Ken Spencer, who had met in Hicks' class, including the founders of PNC Sierra, as well as GrowthWorks Venture Capital and BDC Venture Capital, and we basically managed to scrape enough money together to kind of make it a few months at a time. And that's when I realized so I was on the other side from what I do today. I was the entrepreneur, those guys were the VCs, now I'm the VC, and I don't do the same things to the entrepreneur, by the way. So the idea was, we'll give you this little bit of money, and we'll see how you do. And if you do what you say, we give you more. If you don't do what you say, we'll shoot you. And that was fair. So we ended up basically, and here's where it came out. One of the things you do in physics always is physicists are really good at taking something from here, a concept